Well, how we doing tonight? IB Nation Sports Talk is up and rolling. He's Jesse Stiers. I'm Sean Stiers. Appreciate your patience tonight. And I don't know if our old friend Salty Virginia Peanuts is here. He's usually putting me on the clock early. There he is. It was one of those computer literally took a dump right when I was trying to log into the show on the back end. So I had to reboot the computer and here we are. But glad to have you with us. How are you today, Jess?
I'm doing well. It's tomorrow's Friday, so it's Friday Eve. I get paid tomorrow. Going out with some friends after we get done here, so pretty excited. Can't complain over here.
All right. All right. Let me make sure. Let me check my sound levels here and everything as take a look at this. You might try to bump your microphone level up a little bit just based on what I'm hearing right now. But again, I'm the one that just had the computer issues. I think anyway. I'm not hearing you really loud, so I don't want there to be a huge difference in our audio levels tonight. But again, glad to have you with us. We are here. We've got a UNLV guest later in the show. Andy Yamashita from the Las Vegas Review Journal is going to be with us later in the show. We've got, of course, a full-fledged opening segment. We've got rapid fire coming up in a little bit. We've got it all like we always do tonight. We've got some news to get to first. Before we get to that, if you would hit the like button, subscribe, rate, review. Marcus Freeman's Zoom conference this afternoon. The biggest news to come out of it is tight end Eli Raridan is going to miss the rest of the season. He retore the ACL that he tore last December. So Eli is going to be gone. He is, of course, the second tight end to go down since the season began. Kevin Bauman went down a couple of weeks ago. They just got Mitchell Evans back after he had the foot injury over the summer. But yeah, it is. I'm looking here at Michael in the chat. Sad news. I mean, it always is when these guys, especially when it's an ACL and that kind of thing. But the I guess the impact to the team right now is Eli Raridan has been a heck of a blocker. Jess, arguably the best blocking tight end that they have had this season.
Yeah, that's a really tough blow considering a lot of the personnel that we see Notre Dame kind of run. With the 12 personnel and them trying to accomplish certain run blocking schemes. Tight end is obviously something important for them. So anytime you lose a good blocker, it's never a good thing.
No. And again, I mean, you never want to see anyone go down to a season in need, any kind of season-ending injury, but an ACL just really stinks. So really bad for him. He is a freshman, though. He played well so far this year. He's the fourth Notre Dame player lost to injury since the season started, though. And Bauer just went down last week. You've got Bauman already. Tyler Buckner with the shoulder injury. Avery Davis also had an ACL back in camp. So the list is growing longer, unfortunately, for these injured guys for Notre Dame. A couple other updates from today. Jason Ademola questionable for Saturday. He's got the rib contusion that he suffered in the Stanford game. The main concern, Marcus Freeman said, is his breathing. Have you ever had like a severe rib bruise or like hit hard on the ribs or anything like that?
I think if I remember right, I took like a big kind of block by a big offensive lineman. I was trying to shed or deflect or avoid working on like a rip drill, and I got a nice knee right to my side, and that didn't feel good. Just kind of have to sit out a couple plays for what you were talking about. It just gets hard to breathe, and you feel like you could, especially with all the pads on you, right? You have things kind of squeezing you, and you're really trying to contract and let out a decent amount of air. So that's the main issue that you kind of see in those situations. It doesn't feel good, and you feel kind of suffocated, because you're like I said, you're trying to get air out, and you have these pads kind of strapped to you, keeping everything in. So definitely not a good feeling, and you kind of get almost like a sense of panic at times.
As Brian says, cracked ribs, no fun either. I can only imagine what cracked ribs feel like. So Jason Adamalola, questionable, might be back. You've got other defensive tackles like Chris Smith, Riley Mills, Howard Cross, Gabe Rubio, Jason Anye. They, of course, all play in the depth, get a little bit of thinner, especially if you lose your top 10 guy like Jason Adamalola. Jaden Mickey also questionable with an abdominal strain. He missed last week's game. An abdominal strain, well, maybe not abdominal. I've had more like a rib kind of, like that, like the muscles around your ribs, basically. I don't know if that's considered abdominal or not, but that definitely, it's like that hurts just to try to lay on it when you strain it or pull it or whatever. Those hurt just as well. So we'll see if Jade Mickey is able to come back next week. Sounds like Tariq Bracy will be back. Had the hamstring last week. He, was kind of right up until game time. They thought maybe last week he was going to be able to play, but wasn't able to. So that's kind of the injury rundown. The offense is going to be the main focus of our first segment here today because Marcus Freeman touched on a lot of different topics in the press conference. Well, maybe not a lot, but he went in detail on the topics that he did get to, a good majority of them. And we're going to touch on getting off to a faster start here in a minute. And just like the numbers, when you think about it, are just insane. But he discussed how they're doing things differently at practice to try to cut down on the mental errors in the game. And I think that is just maybe even more distressing than whether or not you score in the first quarter or score right off the bat, like on your opening drive and that kind of stuff, is the mental errors like they have. Just like last week, very first play before the play gets off the ground, you're late getting the play in, and then you've got a false start and all this stuff. But he talked about simplifying the game plan and reducing the number of options and reads that a player might have on each play, again, to simplify things. In other words, like the quarterback only has 2 options on a given play rather than maybe 3 or 4 options on a given play. So what are some of your initial thoughts on hearing some of that?
I think the biggest thing that they need to focus on, and it needs to be some of these smaller goals, like control that you hear a lot of control the things that you can control. And a lot of that is penalties. You can't have any negative yards. You can't have, your big plays kind of called back. And that's what we saw a good amount of last week is, early, like you said, the false start, getting behind the chains due to mental errors. And then, we saw a couple big plays taken off the board due to some penalties as well. And I think another thing you have to look at is just always have positive plays, no matter if it's 1 yard, 2 yards. Ideally, you're shooting for 3 to 4 yards. You want to make sure that you're doing everything possible to have, positive plays and cut back on the stuff that you can control, like penalties. Yeah. I think that has to be the main focus is, just knowing your assignment, making sure, it's a positive play, positive outcome, and controlling a lot of those mental errors.
He expanded on some stuff Tommy Rees and the offense have been doing in practice this week, and I'll let you hear that right now.
In practice, and Coach Rees is really doing a good job of changing the way we do a little bit of our team periods in practice, and he's almost calling it like a game, and that our players don't have a script to say, okay, here's the script, let's memorize it. He's doing a good job of saying, okay, they have to look to the sidelines, get the signal. They don't know exactly what the call is going to be. See, sometimes you script practice where, as I'm going into the game, I know these are the 3 plays I got, and what we're doing is challenge them a little bit to get the calls from the sideline, not know exactly what they're going to do and be able to react. And they're doing a good job of watching. I saw them the other day. They're watching parts of practice as a group. They're watching 7-on-7 periods to make sure there's one voice, everybody's on the same page, and you're being held accountable to your teammates. And if you make a mental mistake, well, you have some older guys that aren't making mental mistakes want to know why. Like, you're held accountable not only to your coaches but to your teammates. And so it's been good to see the enhancement, I think, as an offensive staff, and in terms of not just saying, hey, continue to trust the process. We'll be better. We're going to be better. We're going to execute better. But let's find ways to enhance our process. Let's find ways to fix it.
So it's interesting hearing him say that about the fact that they're spending time in practice now working on essentially relaying in the plays, signals from the sideline and that kind of stuff, not knowing what plays are coming up. So now, rather than the players knowing what plays they're going to be running and actually having the script, they don't have the script. They're relaying the plays in from the sideline. To me, Jess, now, one, like I come from a day when I was playing in high school where the the extra wide receiver just ran the play, in from the sideline. So we weren't doing a lot of signaling back then. But you've played in college not too long ago. So tell me, I would have thought that they would have been working on that kind of thing in training camp and maybe even through the early part of the season if it was an issue in training camp. Like, did you guys, when you were in college, because I know that, your team, I remember, would, signal in plays from the sideline and stuff like that. Did you work on that kind of thing in practice?
Oh yeah, I mean there's no point of having, signals if you can't be able to recognize the signals in a timely fashion. And so yeah, we there were times where we spent exactly doing that. You had people on the sideline who are giving the signals, and a lot of time it's usually, personnel, and then, specifically kind of pass or run play, and then, associated routes that come with that, and blocking, and such and such. And so I think it's surprising to me that if that's the route that they're going, that wasn't kind of nailed down by this point in the season. Usually now it's just kind of a tweaking your signals or adjusting some things if, based on kind of new stuff that you're working on. But, not having the signals down is definitely kind of a red flag, in my opinion.
I'm just shocked that.
And I'm shocked that it was brought, like, said aloud, I think is another thing that's kind of, I wouldn't be saying that out loud to the general public.
Yeah, I mean, because again, there obviously have been times where the play has taken a long time. Now, some of it has to do with scan offense and stuff like that, but still, you had a bye week as well just a couple of weeks ago. So if it was an issue before the bye week, why was not being worked on during the bye week when you have more time? And if it was an issue from the beginning, it just seems like something that they should have spent a good, period or two on every practice, just working on make sure you've got it, get it going, get the timing down, the rhythm down, the whole thing. It's so to me, it is just like you said, it's very surprising that it's taken this long. It's baffling to an extent.
Another thing that we often had, and I am sure that this is like many programs across the country, is you have, a pre-practice as well. There's a 30-minute, we had pre-practice period in which, for us defensively, it was just a lot of basic walkthroughs, right? Like refreshing your brain, going through it really slow, before you did it kind of live and fast time during practice when the pressure is on. And that's another thing that you would hope that the offense would be working on kind of in some, like that pre-practice time, right? That's a perfect time where you can kind of go over those things and make sure. And then during practice, when you're doing your live segments, that's when you're kind of tuning it in, more so. So to me, it's just really surprising that they're dedicating actual practice time to this and not maybe using kind of that pre-practice period. Or, there's other ways I think you can go about accomplishing those things, especially this late in the season. There's other bigger things to be working on, in my opinion.
Well, the other thing, again, like we've talked about, I guess you and I haven't touched on it as much. I know Vince and I have talked about it. Brian's talked about it on his show, with Ryan and those guys as well. Just the fact that it just seems like both coordinators, to an extent, just have so much in their playbooks, and Tommy Rees specifically, that, like, can you just figure out a couple of things you do well, run them out of different formations, and not have to be, like, look at the thing with Tobias Merriweather. Well, no wonder Tobias Merriweather has taken so long to get to where he is. If, like he talked about, now he said 1,000 plays. I don't know if they literally have 1,000 plays, but I wouldn't doubt it at this point. It just seems like some simplification would have gone a long way for this team, as especially considering the varying experience levels, like with with either one of the quarterbacks, for that matter. You want the quarterback to know the whole playbook, but that's a lot to put on a couple of guys who had never started a game before this season.
I think the thing to look at, or the thing that is most important, is you got to have a kind of base of plays that you're really good at, right? And
Right.
I've talked about that before. And I think that that's something that they need to do, is have, personnels where they have a solid base of plays, and then you start working off of those. You start finding, ways to manipulate your base, and then that way it just feels like motion, what is the word I'm looking for? Muscle memory,
Yeah.
muscle memory. And then when you add, certain things, it doesn't feel drastic to the players because 50% of it you've already done because it's your base, it's your foundation. So, and that's something I've talked about a lot of is they can run a lot of simplified, high-powered plays as their base and then tweak week to week, depending on the opponent, certain things that, that they feel like they can take advantage of or manipulate. So to me, it's super surprising that that's not the case because, we're talking at college level here. You don't need an extensive playbook. It's a matter of doing your things very well. And I thought Drunk
Yeah.
Vigo brought up a good point. It seems like, these quarterbacks come in and it's catering around their skills. Why isn't it just like a plug and play where no matter the quarterback, that they can have this success? Why is there always kind of like this tinkering?
One playbook for one guy, one playbook for the guy.
If you have a base or a foundation of plays that work and you can plug and play, that's how the program continuously gets better because you're doing the same things again and again. You're getting better at your foundation of things.
That's right. I mean, just what you said, you shouldn't have to worry about trying to out scheme Marshall and Stanford and, even this year's North Carolina team, those kind of teams, UNLV this week, Navy in a few weeks. You shouldn't have to worry about out scheming those teams. You have the better athletes in all of those matchups. And just to your point, if you just have a good base of plays that you run well, and then then as the season goes on, obviously you're going to continue to add some things so that you don't have the exact same playbook every week, even though what Marcus Freeman says is essentially, they ran the same game plan, almost the exact same game plan 3 weeks in a row. You shouldn't have to out scheme those teams on either side of the ball, offensively or defensively. And it seems like maybe they're doing too much of that.
Yeah, I think the issue is, teams should have to be worried about what they're going to do to stop Notre Dame because Notre Dame does what they do so well. It shouldn't be the other way around. And I think that's the big issue right now. And it ultimately comes down to they're just not doing enough of the same things consistently. It's too much variation. There just needs to be a constant, this is what we do well. We know we do it well, and we're going to make teams stop us. And if they prove they can stop us, then I'm okay with making, halftime adjustments or maybe, pulling out some of these things that might work depending on the looks that they're giving you. But you got to make it so teams prove that they can stop you at what you do well. And I think that that's not what Notre Dame's doing right now.
Well, and Vigo right now in the chat is talking about, differing kind of quarterbacks. You go from Jack Cohn with cement in his cleats last year, to Tyler Buckner in the package last year. But then Buckner comes into this year as, the starting quarterback, and Drew Pine, I guess essentially is kind of in between those two. He's more a pocket guy who has some mobility. He's not quite as lead-footed as Jack Cohn was, but he showed the other day with that 16-yard run. He can run a little bit when he has to, but if you have a program and you have a system, it seems like you would be recruiting the same type of quarterback 1 through 3 or 1 through 4 rather than
Ohio State. Like they do
exactly.
every year. It's just plug and play, and the quarterback gets better because he's doing, he's running the Ohio State plays. He's in the system. There's no system right now offensively for Notre Dame.
Right. Because again, there's this system for you because you're a pocket quarterback. There's this system for you because you're a running quarterback, a dual threat quarterback. And that's something I think we can all agree needs to change. Now, I mean, obviously when you look at the recruiting and the commits, they're different kind of guys out there and a higher level of guys. I guess we'll have to see where all this goes in the long run. Well, something else I asked Marcus Freeman about today was the slow starts that the team has had. They've been outscored 27-6 in the first quarter through 3 games. And I'll be quite honest, it wasn't something that jumped out on me before I was looking at the stat sheet for something else the other day. And I'm like, 6 points? And then I start thinking, where did they come from? I'm like, oh yeah, you have to go all the way back to Ohio State, a field goal on their opening drive of the season, and then BYU, a field goal after the Tariq Bracy interception, they get that in plus territory, and still all they get was a field goal out of it. First quarter, that's their points this season. 2 field goals spread a month and a half apart, basically. So that's what they've done in the first quarter. Now you look at UNLV, they've also been outscored pretty handily in the first quarter, 73-33, but they've still got 33 points, which is more than 5 times what Notre Dame has scored in the first quarter this season. So here are some of Freeman's thoughts on getting the offense out to better starts.
Make sure that we are, one, it's a mentality. And you're not judged, as I just told the team and the staff, you're not judged off of mentality, but you've got to have a right mindset, because that will have a dictate on your actions and how we start the game. And so we got to come out the locker room ready to go with the right mentality. And then, we got to give our offense some confidence plays, some easy drive starters, some plays where there isn't multiple decisions, right? There's going to be one thing we want you to do, and we have to try to look for easy completion, be able to run the ball, establish the run play, and really have no self-inflicted wounds. And you see how we started last game with a penalty to start the game, and then the second down we had some miscommunication. We can't start the game that way. We got to start the game effectively. We got to practice those plays often and make sure our guys know exactly what we plan to see and what we're going to do as an offense.
So you heard some of his thoughts there. Just point blank, how can they get this thing kick-started? What do you think, Jess? Well, what are some easy ways to kind of get this rolling a little bit? 6 points is
The number one thing I look at when it comes to opening drive points and first quarter points is, one, everyone knows that plays are scripted, right? So that's half the battle. I think that half of it comes in the preparation of knowing kind of you've watched your film on the defense, what they're going to, kind of come, and then have some just counter punches ready. It's your opening drive, and just like I said, rhythm. And Jason Garrett brings this up, all the time when talking about Notre Dame in game. Another great Jason Garrett point for everyone out there keeping track of Jason Garrett points. But
he's made some, right?
Right. This whole offense is predicated around being able to run the ball. And I think that that's they need to be a well-oiled machine and rhythmic in the step that, they take these small steps, run the ball, get some short passes, run the ball, have success, get a rhythm going. And then you start working in those play action passes. That's ultimately what their game plan is and how they're going to get their big chunk plays. But you have to, get the run game going and build off that play action and get the rhythm going. So then the more, you're going down the field, it feels like they're taking another bigger step. And that's when you start, the play actions and your playbook starts opening up a little bit and you're taking those shots downfield. But to me, it all starts with getting a nice, methodical rhythm to start the game. A lot of power run plays, a lot of, the quick little passes that we see out in the flat to Mayer and Lindsey coming across in motion in the formation. Just nice little plays where you're just flicking it, right? Just nothing crazy. But then you start building up those play action plays and opening up the playbook down the field. And then you could start taking your shots to get some of those points. So that's, to me, the main thing is just nice rhythmic plays where you're getting 3 to 4 yards every play. I think that bodes well for them. And you can start opening up with the play action game after that.
Yeah, and I mean, to me, when you broke out the spreadsheet the other night, there was the touchdown drive that they had in the second half, and just as you said sarcastically, oh, look at this tempo. You had it marked on there that it was a tempo drive. It just seems to me, if you're going to script the plays, the script, what plays you're going to call. Why haven't tempo got the offense kind of kick-started last year midseason? It jolted it with Jack Cohn. Why haven't they come out in more tempo right away?
And I think that that's another big factor because of, what they do well. They're big physical guys up front. They have hogs on the offensive line. So what do? You get going and you get going fast and you continuously punch them in the mouth. Use your big on big size. You take advantage of that. Keep going, take the tempo up. Don't allow them to sub and just keep exploiting again and again their weakness. And that's what really tempo accomplishes, is the ability to exploit someone's weakness continuously without giving them the opportunity to fix it.
Yeah. Exactly. Revolver was asking, does anyone else run scan offense? I mean, you see it all over the place.
Yeah, you
It's
see it when, like, teams hold up those signs that have a quadrant of 4 different pictures. There's just
yeah.
different ways of going about it, essentially.
And other teams don't use the whole play clock to get their play called using it, you know. Because again, it's usually like you get to the line quickly, and rather than calling a play, changing a play, you get to the line, the play is called, and then boom, you get the now. There are some off it because you've seen it. It can get annoying. It's not just Notre Dame. It's just that Notre Dame is doing it this year. Like it does get annoying watching some other teams too. Like when you see them do it, where they just stand there at the line of scrimmage, they're looking to the sideline for the play call and all that stuff. But again, it is a lot of offensive coordinators feeling the need to be the puppet master and dictating the show, and not some quarterbacks need more help than others, but I think that Notre Dame has some bright guys. I don't think they probably need to do quite as much as they're doing.
What I've told you this before, and I think this maybe sounds crazy, but this is just how I would go about it. And if I were the head coach, I previously was talking about having a base play or a set, kind of thing, that formation that you do well. What's stopping them from establishing those kind of base formations and calling, if you have a base formation and a foundation of what you're trying to do, then it's so easy that if you line up in a formation, you can have your quarterback audible to either the pass play or the run play that comes out of that formation, just depending on the numbers that you're getting, because that's what they're doing in the scan offense. Is they're just seeing what the defense gives them and calling, the ideal play. So instead of doing scan offense, why not, build in some RPOs or just come to the line in a set formation, and depending on what Pine sees, he knows to call to the pass or to the run.
If the defender's down here, you're going to pass. If the defender's back here, you're going to run.
And it's easy for the offense because in that formation that these are the plays that potentially can run. So it's not hard, but that's what the advantage is of simplifying and getting down into kind of some base plays. Is it's so easy to be like, okay, well, based on this, we're going to do the pass play or we're going to do the run play that we've been practicing all week.
Yeah.
So I think that those are easy adjustments to speeding things up, but still kind of, getting that scan aspect in for them.
And again, go back to that Fiesta Bowl, RPO City, they broke it out. It was really successful, but not so much now. I mean, look at the way Philly in the first half was able to take one of the best defenders in the league, Micah Parsons, out of the game the other night with that RPO. They just said, okay, we're going to read you. Whatever you do, we're going to go opposite of it. And they were able to have some success with that until Dallas figured out a way to adjust to it. I think with, again, like with the different personnel and everything else at their disposal, I think they'd be able to kind of make some hay with that offensively, but we haven't seen that so far. All right. One other thing that I wanted to get in here, because there had been some talk this week, kind of rumors, I don't know, whatever, floating around about whether or not Marcus Freeman wanted to bring in an offensive analyst in the offseason with coaching experience to work with Tommy Rees this season. And the whole scuttlebutt was Rees shot it down because it was supposedly former Duke head coach David Cutcliffe. And so Rees was asked about it the other day, and he says, well, it's Freeman's program. If he wants to bring in an analyst, he can do whatever he wants to do. That's not my call. But he did add that they have a vacancy for an analyst currently. So that was brought up in the press conference today, and here is Freeman's answer to that.
I think it's a vacancy as much as we're always looking for ways to enhance our program, and bringing on an offensive analyst was something, additional offensive analyst was something we were looking at prior to the start of the season. But it had to be the right fit. It had to be the right person. And just a couple avenues we looked at and just talked to wasn't going to be what's right for us and what's right for those guys that maybe we had talked to and just kind of felt out. And so it's not a vacancy where we're looking to fill it. We're always looking for ways to enhance. And guess what? If that's 1, 2, or 3 analysts on either side of the ball, special teams, if it's going to enhance our program, we'll definitely continue to look into it. But we're not just looking for a number. We're not looking for just anybody to fill a spot to help us continue to enhance. It has to be somebody that truly fits this staff and really the direction we're going.
So there you go. There's a vacancy that's not a vacancy, but they'll fill it if they find the right fit. So I don't know. I guess that's clarification to some extent. But again, there's all these rumors floating around. And as Vigo says, Tommy doesn't want to answer to anyone. I mean, he still would be the offensive coordinator. So an analyst still has to answer to the guy at the top. I don't know. But that's the answer to it anyway. What do you think?
It was hard to actually get anything from that because it felt like Freeman was talking in a circle. It's is there a vacancy? Isn't there a vacancy? And it's like it sounds like there is a vacancy if like the right name pops up, but they're not actively looking. It feels like they want it to be like this, like fairy tale story where someone just magically falls in the spot and they all like do well together. But at the same time, if it goes bad, they don't want that to be their responsibility either.
Yeah.
So it just to me sounds like they can't decide whether or not that they would like it. But someone like David Cutcliffe, I think you would benefit them. I mean, who are they to? I would understand kind of why Tommy Rees would be a little jealous. He's coached Peyton Manning, Eli Manning, Daniel Jones. Like
right.
He's got a good resume. He's a they don't call him the quarterback guru for no reason. So I think someone like that just kind of with some experience, and I think that's what Tommy's biggest issue is right now is he's like very experimental and doesn't have enough test results to have kind of the conclusions that he wants. And so it's like, why not bring in someone who has seen things more, has more experience that could just be a nice like bird in your ear and just kind of be like, hey, you're doing these things right, or I would maybe stay away from these kind of things. So to me, it feels like that's kind of the issue right now.
I think the experimental thing hit the nail on the head, just like him saying that 2 summers ago he watched every play from the NFL and he watched more college this year. It's just, he's got the NFL connections. And even though he won't come out and say it out loud, it sure seems like he wants to coach in the NFL. And it does seem like he's kind of throwing darts at the board with some of this stuff, to show what he can do, but also like he's running so much early on. It's like, okay, does this work? Does this not? So again, like when we go back to the thing about the fast starts or the lack of the fast starts, is it just because he's kind of tinkering a little bit too much early on and not necessarily worried as much about trying to score? I mean, obviously they want to score, but it's like, why aren't you scoring more? Well, because they're doing so much, it seems like.
Yeah, and Tommy has to realize, and I think he knows this. He's got respect. People know who he is. There's people who have high praise for him. Like when you see Notre Dame on networks where other than NBC, the non-home games where you have to kind of watch them depending on where they're at. People have Dan Orlovsky always says nice things about Tommy Rees. Like, and that's coming from someone who is constantly in the NFL world, the NFL bubble. So like these guys, his name is around, it no longer needs to be kind of like the proving himself experimental stuff, like just have success consistently. And I think that's the thing, people will recognize you if that's the case. You have to have the consistent success. And that's really what's hurting him, because I don't think that he's obviously having a good showing right now, considering, where his offensive ranks are. And you can, devil's advocate would say that, you transition between two quarterbacks, but, we're beyond that. You coach at Notre Dame, you're expected to have success, and the next guy has to be ready. And I think that their offense actually looks better with Drew Pine. I think it fits kind of Tommy Rees's style a bit more. So to me, I just think that he needs to get his own ego out of the way sometimes and just coach, just play, how you're supposed to.
Vigo is on a roll tonight, man. He was pretty quiet last night, but he is rolling tonight. And Indy Nation with a super chat. Please bring in anybody SOS. There are a lot of people who concur with that sentiment. Well, we've got an interview coming up at the end with a UNLV writer. So with that said, Jess, are you ready for rapid fire?
Let's go with rapid fire.
Okay, so we're going to do it a little bit differently tonight. I'm going to explain the ground rules tonight. It's called sliding scales. So you'll start with a point total value of 10. You're going to have two different things that you're going to like slide your chips to, basically. It's like I've got to slide some of my chips to this side, or you can slide 0, but then you've got to slide all 10 to the other side. You've got two options that you're going to divide it up between. So, for example, if I asked you if you had a good or a bad day, you might put 7 points on the good and 3 points on the bad, or maybe the opposite for that matter. But that's how it's going to work. So do you understand the ground rules?
I do understand the ground rules.
Okay. It sounds like Henry does as well. Either that or he was saying, I don't get it, but we'll see how this whole thing goes. So we're going to start with this one. Your confidence that Notre Dame will beat either Clemson or USC versus the Irish losing to either Syracuse, Navy, Boston College, or UNLV. So you've got 10, you got to slide some in one direction, some in the other. So which do you have the greater confidence in, that Notre Dame will beat either Clemson or USC, or they will lose one of the other 4 remaining games?
For me, I'm going to put 6 points that they will beat either Clemson or USC, and put the remaining 4 that they would lose to Syracuse, Navy, BC, or UNLV. To me, I think that nothing's a given anymore, but UNLV and Navy are games that I feel very confident that they will win. Syracuse, I feel like they are the better team. It just matters, what kind of team shows up. Do they play how they played against North Carolina and BYU? If they do, I think Syracuse shouldn't be an issue for them. I think it'll be a great game overall, and I think that's a very kind of even opponent right now for who Notre Dame is currently. And I think BC could present some issues as well. Going against, and then why I have 6 against Clemson or US for Clemson and USC that Notre Dame would beat them is because I really don't feel like that they will lose to Syracuse, Navy, BC, or UNLV, but that there's still the opportunity or the chance. And I think, again, I said this on Tuesday, the most frustrating thing about Notre Dame is they can go out and lose to Navy, but then the next week they could go out and beat USC. And I still think they have a very good chance of beating USC if they play how they're supposed to. And that's really the tale of the story this year is if they play to their potential and get out of their own way, I could see them going 6-0 and beating, obviously USC or Clemson. But then at the same time, I could see them still losing to Navy or Boston College. So that's where I'm going to put it. 6 on one side and 4 on the other.
That's where I've got mine exactly the same as well. I've got my 6 confidence that they would beat either Clemson or USC, and my 4 that they would lose to either Syracuse, Navy, Boston College, or UNLV. Because again, when you've lost to Marshall and this Stanford team, like Stanford traditionally, like 5 years ago, it would have meant something. It wouldn't obviously have been as bad losing to this team. But the Stanford of this season is horrible. And the Marshall of this season has turned out not to be a good team. It's a 500 team, and Stanford's still sub 500. So the fact that they could lose to those two, it does mean they could go out and potentially lose to anybody. But at the same time, there is enough talent that, as you said, if they get their stuff together, I do think they're capable of beating Clemson or USC. Now, I'm not going to go out on a limb right now. I just feel slightly more confident that they can beat one of those two teams than they would lose to the other. I mean, 6-4, we're close to 50-50, right? So it's not like we're saying we're completely confident in the win. But, like you look at USC, I think that they're a team that Notre Dame can out-physical out there. And I think that, their strength is passing the ball. And I think that Notre Dame can cover them, from a secondary standpoint. So I think that can be a good competitive game. Like, the game that might scare me the most right now is Boston College, just because of what I just said about Marshall and USC. They've already lost to those kind of teams. BC is not good, but because to them especially, it's a rivalry type situation. Boston College, Notre Dame, and you've got the Phil Jurkovec factor coming back in the door. So, like, aren't we just expecting, the way this season has gone, something fluky to happen right off the bat with that anyway? So it can happen. I'm still slightly more confident that they can beat one of those other two teams, but I'm with you. 6 on one, 4 on the other. Okay. How much of the rest of Notre Dame's season should be about the future versus how much should be about this year? Where are you sliding your chips now on this? The future versus now.
So I'm gonna slide 7 to now and 3 to future, just because I think a lot of their future is kind of right now. This team is already kind of considerably young, right? You have 3 running backs who are all going to be back next year. You have a quarterback that obviously has time left, who is going to be competing again for another spot next year. You have wide receivers now folding into the action, getting a lot of experience. You have a very young very young secondary. I think where I would slide let's get, some experimental and get some of these younger guys is in the linebacker core. And on the wide receiver side, I think that those are areas where you could really, you see some development and kind of some of their weaker spots this year. So, but I still think at the same time, there's still a lot to play for. There's still a lot of good talent on the team. There's a lot of good opponents coming up. And I still think you can have a very successful season at like an 8-4 clip, or potentially a 9-3 clip if you run the table. Those aren't bad seasons, overall, compared to what they've been in the past, that we're so accustomed to 10-win seasons. I think an 8-4, 9-3 season for a first-time head coach, getting his kind of bearings, that's a good season, considering Notre Dame also has the number 1 schedule in the country. Or at least if you don't want to say number 1, top 5, you can make a very, that's a guarantee. So that's where I kind of lie on that. 7 towards still playing for now, and 3 for the future.
Interesting comment Stymie made. The future should involve a new offensive coordinator. So I guess 100% towards now. And I mean, I don't know what they're going to do there. I mean, obviously we know a lot of fans are disgruntled, but I have no idea what they're going to do there. So I guess we have to assume that the current guy is going to be around. I cheated a little bit. I split one of my chips in half. So like you had 7 on now versus 3 for the future. I went 6.5, 3.5, but still weighted to the side you said. Mine is still more now. You can't give up on now, because you have to send a message to this team, and you're still trying to figure some things out. As we talked about earlier, you're trying to clean some things up, and cleaning those things up is going to affect your future. So you still have to do that. But that said, with a 3-3 season right now, and already on your number 2 quarterback, I would like to see a Steve Angeli package at some point in the future. I would like to see Steve Angeli get on the field for like a series per game, similar to what Tyler Buchner did last year. Now, obviously, his skill set is not to that extreme of Tyler Buchner. He's mobile, but not ultra mobile like him. I would like to see him. I do think you need to start mixing in young guys, and I'm not saying playing young guys and starting young guys en masse, but I do think that you need to get some of those guys on the field. And Anthony says, "Way to put a dark cloud on the topic." It's like, just crap all over us and take away all of our hope. I'm sorry. I mean, he's there for a reason. And a lot of people were excited about the fact that he was here. And then you see the first half of the Fiesta Bowl and everybody got even more excited. And then we haven't seen that guy since then. So
I think a lot of people brought up a good point in the chat over the last couple of minutes. And I would Notre Dame has just missed a dominant quarterback. Like Brady Quinn or why is he Jimmy Clausen? Jimmy Clausen, say what you want about him, he still went to the NFL. He was still, a well-known name, and just kind of, he was a good, dominant quarterback, big arm. I just wish, you can. I don't think Ian Book was that. So if anyone wants to say that Ian Book was, this great, Ian Book was a very average to above average quarterback. He wasn't elite. He's wasn't
not even
next
suiting
level.
up for the Eagles right now. He's practice squad.
Right. I just want a stud quarterback at Notre Dame. And I think that's every program wants that. But if you're Notre Dame, you should be able to hit on one by now, right? Like you should be able to, you're running through kind of your chances where it's like, well, we've consistently missed. And that's a trait of a school that, doesn't have the presence that Notre Dame does.
I'm just glad that the Phil Jurkovec chirping, because this could very easily be like everyone, we should have had Jurkovec. And unfortunately for him, this is not like, I'm not. He has regressed. Like he had a nice beginning when he went to Boston College because they let him do some things, but he is literally one of the worst Power 5 quarterbacks in the country right now. And everyone was all upset and raving about him a few years ago and up in arms when he left, and all the gruntledness, Book and Dracovic and everything else. And the quarterback recruiting has got to get better, but they've got this guy, CJ Carr, coming in. And
legacy.
And yeah, well, a legacy someplace else, but hopefully
like the name is a legacy.
That's right. Hopefully he's the guy. But as Vince and I were talking about the other day, it can't just be CJ Carr. They have to go out and continue to get high-level quarterbacks. It can't be like, okay, we've got Buckner. Now we're going to get, a handful of three-star guys to fill the rest of the roster. We have Wimbush, and we're going to get three-star guys to fill the rest of the roster. It's got to be, you've got to keep pushing for 4- and 5-star quarterback types. And if one of them ends up transferring, they end up transferring, just like Ohio State or Georgia or, Alabama or some of these other programs. You got to keep shooting high at that quarterback position. Let really good quarterbacks battle it out in training camp and in fall camp for those starting jobs. And if somebody transfers, so be it. I mean, it's happening across the rest of college football. You can't go from potentially such a high level to a lower level at your quarterback position. They've got to start making better hits and better marks at that quarterback position with their recruiting.
I definitely agree.
Okay. Next question. Your confidence in Notre Dame's running back room versus your concern about the wide receivers room. How do you split your 10 points on this one?
I put 8 points in my confidence in the running back room. I think that is their number one. That's their best offensive position right now, outside of the offensive line. But that's like a whole unit. It's hard to justify a whole unit. But position wise, they have 3 running backs that could be starters at any Power 5 school, in my opinion. They all do a lot of things well. They all do a variation of things. Like Estime, obviously big power runner, but he's still good on his feet. He can get the little twinkle toes if he needs to. I like the speed and elusiveness that Diggs has in the hole. He's able to get up to speed quick and then also get back up to speed quick, if that makes sense. Like he can make a cut and get back up to full speed very quickly again. And then obviously, Tyree's ability, he's more the pass catching, using him out of the backfield more, being able to, he runs well. So their running back room is very solid. And I think they're all happy, with the harmony and the what they can kind of, how they play off of each other. Right. And the fact that they can all kind of get the touches they need and succeed. And then, it's very clear that there is a lot of concern with the wide receiver room and just getting, I just think that they just need like a refresh. If it were me and wide receiver, I would just almost be okay with putting out a lot of the young guys at this point and just letting them kind of their athleticism.
There aren't that many young guys. So it's basically Meriwether,
Right, but just doing something to get new bodies in there. I just feel like the people now they're not really, they haven't shown anything, right? Like there's no one in there that's like, wow, you have consistently shown that you're able to produce at wide receiver. So I'm going 8 running backs, 2 wide receivers.
Exactly the same. But if Tobias Meriwether starts playing more and is involved in the game plan and producing more, I can get this to, close to even, maybe 5 and 5 or even 6 to the running backs and 4 to the wide receivers. It really depends on that at this point. We saw great potential with Tobias Meriwether. How much of the full offense is he really, like how many full plays can he go without, one defense is knowing every time he runs out on the field, or 80% of the time he runs out on the field, he's going to be thrown to. That gets pretty easy to figure out pretty soon, especially after watching film from last week. But if somehow Tobias Meriwether starts becoming a consistent playmaker, I think it changes the entirety of the offense. And then you really do have a chance to beat one of those, Clemson or USC like we were talking about. But full confidence in the running backs for everything that you said. It's great great position of strength right now. Okay, Jess. Speaking of like Meriwether, this is kind of tied into that. We've heard a lot about players needing to earn more trust in practice to get more game day playing time. So after a player gets game time and shows what he can or can't do there, how much stock needs to be put in actual game time that he has versus practice time in determining future playing time?
The hard thing is with this kind of question is, practice time, there's 5 days of it during the week. So the sample size is much larger. So if you're consistently doing it wrong in practice day after day after day, then it's really hard to have the trust in you to do it. And then you get into the game and your sample size is so small and you might hit, on one of those 4 or 5 plays that you're in, but it's because your sample size is so small, right? And so I take more stock in practice, and so I'm going to put 6.5 on practice and 3.5 in the game, because there's something said for people who are just gamers, right? They for some reason they can show up, and that's when they're the best, because that's when the pressure's on, and it's almost like practice is too boring for them, or they don't have the concentration to do it at practice, but when they know everything's on the line, they can do it. But because of what I'm saying, the sample size, you have to put weight into it for that reason. And so if you're consistently showing 4 or 5 days a week that you can't do it, then that's why you're getting those small chances, because you have shown you can do it, but you're consistently showing that you're not. If that it's kind of hard to put into words, but that's where I'm coming from. So 6.5 and 3.5.
Oh, I get what you're saying, because you're getting maybe 10 snaps on game day, but you're getting
probably 100 snaps throughout the week.
At least 100 snaps during the week, maybe. Or, even if it's 50 snaps during the week, it's still a lot more than what you're getting on game day. But I guess what I'm saying is, if you're proving it on game day and then you go to practice and, isn't practice supposed to be about making mistakes and figuring out how to learn it? Like, as long as you're not making the exact same mistake over
Right.
and over and over again, like maybe you make a mistake and then you get something figured out, but then doing something else, maybe you make a mistake. So
it also depends on like what kind of mistake it is. Like if
exactly,
what the route is, but if you're not lining up on the hash when you're supposed to be lining up on the numbers, then it's like, the whole concept of where the play is kind of supposed to be going gets screwed up at that point.
Yeah. And I guess once you start showing up on game day, though, if you're proving that you can do it and you're not having game day screw ups, then I do think at least a little bit more weight needs to be put there. So I give it, what'd you say? Did you say 6 and 4?
I did 6.5, 3.5.
6.5, 3.5. I think I'm 6 and 4 toward game. Because again, we're talking about someone who's already playing in the games, not like he has to rely solely on practice to get to the games. He's playing in games. He's doing okay in games. Maybe practice, he's not quite perfect yet. So I flipped it around the other way a little bit. Tom Brady versus Bill Belichick. Where are you going here?
5 and 5. I'm equal. I think that they are the best. They are best when in harmony, right? I think the whole reason Tom got going is because of Bill, but the longevity of Bill is only because of Tom. And so I think that those two are a split 50-50. I think it's in that one, it's like the chicken or the egg, in my opinion. But like I said, Tom got good because of the system he was in that Bill Belichick brought him up in. But
Fair.
They had the longevity and all of the Super Bowls and the continued success because Tom's dedication to just being good. And so
They
Bill
were great
really,
because they were together, though.
exactly. So that's what I'm going 5 and 5, right down the middle.
Yeah. I slanted a little bit more toward Brady. I go 6 and 4 because of the fact that he was able to go to Tampa Bay and win a Super Bowl right away with a guy who is already not coaching now, Bruce Arians. I think it shows who was running the show down there. Now, all this latest stuff, there's just so much drama now that's starting to follow Tom Brady. It's insane. I mean, Bill Belichick, for what he's got to work with in terms of a quarterback right now, he keeps plugging away and he's trying. I wonder how long he keeps plugging away, but I thought they'd be a little bit better. This Bailey Zappi kid, though, he might end up being the answer that nobody knew they needed the way it's worked out so far.
I still like Mac Jones. I think they're kind of
I do too.
having issues defensively this year compared to, where they've been in the past. That good solid defense, no matter your quarterback. You got to. I think I saw a stat the other day, like the last 5 Super Bowls, the defenses have ranked in the top like 7 or 8. Like you still have to have a solid defense if you want to go all the way. And I think that's kind of hurting New England as well. And obviously Mac Jones getting hurt. I still think Mac Jones can be a really good quarterback. So it'd be interesting to see, because I don't think Bill Belichick is afraid to play the guy who's got the hot hand and who's winning, because that's ultimately, what it comes down to. So it's like, when do you potentially reintroduce Mac Jones? Do you ride Bailey Zappi until he just kind of fizzles out? And if that doesn't happen, if he never does fizzle out, then you're facing kind of a much larger problem or situation at that point.
Yep. Okay, next question. How much you love your favorite teams versus how much you hate their biggest rivals?
That's a good question. This one's easy for the Cowboys, because the Cowboys have owned their rivals in their division pretty much the last 5 or 6 years. So
that's true.
For the Cowboys, I'm gonna go like 8-2, just because I really hate Eagles fans. I think they're kind of the worst out there. When it comes to Notre Dame, though, I would say again, I'm up there because Notre Dame has been pretty successful in their rival games of recent, right? And so again, I'm gonna go probably 8-2. I don't really get too caught up in the rivalry thing. As long as there's winning, that's the thing that I'm mainly concerned about. The rivalry is just like an extra tag kind of on it for me.
Yeah, I'm 9-1. 9 to my favorite team, 1 for the rivals. I mean, otherwise, if you have more hate for your rivals than you have, love or whatever for your favorite team, it's what I call Purdue syndrome or Kansas State University syndrome. It's like, if more of your energy is focused on the other team than your team, it is misplaced. Just like Purdue fans, I think, exert just as much, if not more, energy sometimes on hating Indiana, or when Purdue and Notre Dame used to play football all the time, it was the same thing. They had like just as much hate for Notre Dame football and other sports where they were playing as they did for their own team. And it's the same with Kansas State University and Kansas. It's like they spend so much time throwing hate at the other team. They're much more worried about that than they are actually cheering for their own team most of the time. So I'm 9 for my team, 1 for the rivals. I don't have enough time to exert that much energy on the others unless they get to the playoffs. Now, if they get to the playoffs, then
it's a different story.
Yes,
yeah,
that's right. That's right. All right, last one. How much do you consider yourself a college football fan versus just a football fan in general?
Oh, so we're not even considering NFL. It's just the whole football.
That's part of like football fan. Like, okay. So you've got just college football, or I'm a football fan.
I'm
a football fan is factored in. The NFL is factored into. I'm a football fan, not just a college football.
10-0. I am a football fan just in general. I think that both levels provide, I just can't understand the people who are, I just watch NFL only, or I just watch college only. I think that's kind of what you're getting at with this question, now that you've kind of explained it a little bit. So, that's like I said, I am just a football fan in general. And I know there's people who are just college fans, and there's people like, I'm just an NFL fan for different reasons. A lot of college people say, well, it just seems more natural. The NFL are guys, are just playing for the money. And then there's the people in the NFL who are, college is amateur, and you just don't see as many mistakes. It's a cleaner product in the NFL. So for me, it's just I'm a football fan in general. And I think if I broke down, I would actually lean a little bit more towards the NFL. It'd be like 5.5 to 4.5.
Right.
If it were that scale. But
with Notre Dame heavily weighting your college side of the equation, basically.
Right. There's really no other college team that I care for outside of Notre Dame. Unless
a lot of people, and I'm not surprised a lot of people here are like down on the NFL. We see them, kind of chiming in, because this is, we're more geared obviously toward Notre Dame in college anyway. But I've just always like it hasn't mattered to me. NFL, college, I just like to watch good football. Like as far as college goes, like I'll watch a top 25 matchup or Notre Dame. Obviously, I want to see good football. And now there's bad football in the NFL, but you're also watching professionals out there. And just like I grew up watching both, and I actually grew up watching predominantly more NFL than college because of where I lived. I didn't live in this area, so I didn't have Notre Dame on every day like everyone has around the country with the NBC contract and all that. So, I'm old enough to not have that. But like I just like to kick back, like one, it's hard to watch other college games, unless like it's a night game, like unless Notre Dame is playing a night game, because covering Notre Dame, that consumes a huge chunk of the day. So you don't get to watch quite as much. Whereas like Sunday gets here, man, I just want to kick back. I've got my Sunday ticket. I'm watching the NFL. I'll flip it around, watch whatever is on there. So I just consider I'm basically nine on football. And again, I'm not saying I'm one as a college football fan. I consider myself a football fan, which factors in both college and the NFL, and even high school for that matter, if it's a good game,
Yeah,
So.
the number one thing that I think makes me a football fan is I just like seeing the evolution of the game, and it's never being played the same year. You got to be able to adapt, and that's what I like to see. What are these people? What are these guys' new brilliant schemes? What are they doing to kind of change the way that we look at football? Like this year, you see a lot of that kind of slot fade where you got a wide receiver. It's the favorite route this year. NFL guys are using. You got guys, wide receiver in the slot that's fading towards the sideline. And that's just, it's just interesting to see what the new wrinkles are. And that's why I like football. It's just, it's constantly changing. And there's more things that are changing per year, in my opinion. And, Brian NY asked if Notre Dame was 5-1, would it make you, the success doesn't really matter. It's just quality.
It has
and good
nothing to do with this
games.
year. It's just like football, in general. Yep. Good.
I'll watch every week. If the Cowboys have sucked before, more so recently than Notre Dame has.
I've watched a lot of bad, both Notre Dame and Dallas Cowboys.
Right. I'm still
every
showing
game
up
over the years,
every week. And that's, because I love football, and obviously because I enjoy, those are the teams that I like to watch the most. I'll say this, I get the most into the Cowboys and the most upset about the Cowboys, because at the end of the day, they're professionals and they get paid large sums of money. And these college guys, they're still amateurs. They still have a lot going on. They're still worrying about, their girlfriend that was mad at them. And, there's just so much more that factors in to being a college student compared to being an NFL where that's solely your job. And so that's why I get a little bit more invested, just because of, the status. I understand and have more acceptance for errors at the college level.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. I do get more upset at the pro guys than the college guys. The college guys are still trying to figure things out, whereas the pro guys are getting paid a lot of money to be out there. So, all right, well, that's going to do it for today. Great stuff as always. Jess, Vince and I will be here Saturday morning, IB countdown to kickoff, 10 o'clock. We will have the show. So that'll be our next full show. But for right now, I've got our UNLV guest I'm going to bring in next. Jess, I will have a good weekend. I will talk to you later.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
All right. Absolutely. So going to talk a little UNLV football right now. UNLV now, we've got Andy Yamashita, who covers the Runnin' Rebels football team for the Las Vegas Review-Journal. How you doing today, Andy? Thanks for doing this.
I'm doing great. Happy to be here. And I've had a couple of people say this. Runnin' Rebels is technically only the basketball team. The football team is just the Rebels.
I thought I might have put my tongue in my mouth as soon as my foot in my mouth as soon as I said it. So
it's all good. I don't really know where it all comes from. All of the different teams have something different. The baseball team calls themselves like the Hustlin' Rebels, and so you figure it out when you're out here. But yeah, I mean, it's just something like a little quirk, I guess, with the UNLV athletics department.
Yeah, always fun when the mascot is different from one team to the next.
I just call them all the Rebels. Yeah. When I write.
Well, let me start with this, because obviously this game, no UNLV, first meeting between these programs, and it is here at Notre Dame, and obviously most games are traditionally on NBC. This is going to be on Peacock. Have you heard much blowback from UNLV fans out there? The fact that they're going to have to watch it on the old streaming service instead of broadcast TV.
I haven't had any fan emails about it in particular. I know obviously I get to go to the game, so it's not as big of an issue for me, but I know
right.
I'm a big soccer fan, and so sometimes I can't watch games that are on Peacock. So I understand that for certain people, if you don't have the streaming platform or anything, it's going to be a bit of a challenge to find it. I got a couple emails from NBC Universal promoting Peacock as the exclusive streaming partner and everything. So they're excited about it, I guess, and it'll be interesting to see. I haven't had any fan emails or anything like that about it, but from my own personal experience, it's definitely a bit of a challenge to find the games once in a while. But yeah, it'll be interesting.
Yeah, we'll see what happens Monday, or when you get back into town, and what the feedback is like afterwards, I guess, because Notre Dame, at least it happened once last year, so I think fans are, this will be the second streaming only game, so it's it's definitely different, but everyone's got to adapt, I guess. Kind of like you were just alluding to, when most people think of UNLV, I think the first thing that comes to mind, probably still, especially if you're closer to my age demographic, is Jerry Tarkanian and the Runnin' Rebels basketball, like the late 80s and early 90s success and all that. What's the football following like out there right now?
I think it's been dormant for years. They've been looking for success. They've been waiting for something to happen. They just built a new training facility, the Fertitta football facility at Rebel Park, which is really nice, has a lot of perks and a lot of the stuff that you'd expect at a Power 5 program, to be honest. And they play at Allegiant Stadium, which is obviously a beautiful facility, and there's definitely people here who are interested and who want UNLV football to be good. They've just been kind of waiting on any sign of optimism. This is a team that I believe won 2 games in the last 2 seasons. They already have 4 wins this year, so we're already seeing a bit of a reignition, I guess, of the UNLV fan base. They've been waiting for something to happen, and they're like this for basketball too. They've been waiting for something good to happen with these programs for a while, and they're starting to trend in the right direction. But obviously, these last 2 weeks have kind of been a bit of a speed bump in that progression.
Yeah, we'll get to that here in a second. I'm curious though, what again, this is the first meeting between Notre Dame and UNLV. You've got a program, or a school, as we've said, that's not thought of. It's a basketball school that's not thought of for football, and you're taking on one of the more iconic programs in college football history. Is there a lot of excitement, enthusiasm out there? Just the fact that UNLV is coming out here.
Yeah, definitely. I think it was pretty clear amongst the players and amongst Marcus Arroyo that the team is excited for this opportunity to play at South Bend, play in a historic stadium, play in front of a large crowd. I think Austin Ajike, the linebacker, said it best. They want to take this opportunity. They want to appreciate this opportunity. But the way that they've been talking about it, it's not just about being able to say we played Notre Dame. They want to be able to say we played well against Notre Dame. And, especially coming off again these last 2 weeks, they're looking for just anything that shows that they have something left for this final stretch of the season. And I think there's definitely an air of excitement. California is probably is the only other Power 5 team they've played this year. So this will definitely be a different step in terms of atmosphere and environment. And the other thing to remember is, a lot of these kids weren't highly recruited by big programs, or maybe they came from big programs and would love to get back to that environment. So I definitely think amongst the players, amongst the fan base too, a little bit, there's definitely some excitement for this game, whether UNLV plays well or not. I think that just the mythos of Notre Dame and Notre Dame football certainly isn't lost on people out here.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Marcus Arroyo, 3rd year as the head coach out there right now. They really struggled his first couple of years, losing records. How would you describe him in the style that he has?
I mean, he's definitely I think he's definitely learned a lot in the 2 years from the reporters who covered him early in his time here. Something he's pointed out multiple times is he really didn't get a full traditional football calendar until this year. An uninterrupted spring camp, an uninterrupted season, not worrying about COVID testing and everything like that as much, stuff like that. So he's found had his own growth, but also had more of a traditional opportunity, more of what he was expecting. He talked about this in spring too. He keeps binders of everything that happens on each day in spring. And he came out preparing for this spring football and realized he didn't have a binder for it because he'd never done it before, And so he was really excited about just getting a chance to do that. I'd say from his style, he wants to run the football. He's a former offensive coordinator from Oregon.
Right.
He's an offensive-minded coach. He's still the play caller. So he wants to establish the run a lot, and then that opens up their big playability. That hasn't been there the last 2 games, which has been a big part of why UNLV's lost by a combined 82-14 over the last 2 weeks. But
right.
I think, and then injuries, that's the other thing. But they're he's a charismatic guy. He's got a young coaching staff that seems engaged after having such a good start to the season. 2 weeks ago, people were talking about maybe there's a Mountain West Western Division title on the line here, and maybe they can go to the Mountain West championship game, and maybe the jump from 2-win team to a 8-win conference champion was a bit too big to expect from them. But 6 wins, bowl eligibility is still certainly on the table for UNLV. Yeah. And that would be a big achievement considering where they've been for the last couple years. So it'll be interesting to see not only how this Notre Dame game goes, but the next couple games after that to see if there is something to build on here and if there's some momentum.
Well, I did see some stuff before the season started, hot seat type talk, because again, you had losing records the first couple of years and all that, 2-10 last year. If this season does unravel, especially to a greater extent, would he, is he coaching for his job maybe here down the stretch of the season?
I definitely think that's possible. I think the other thing to keep in mind with any kind of hot seat talk is that UNLV has a new athletic director, Eric Harper, who is a former football player. He's a football guy. And, he didn't, while he was here as one of the assistant athletic directors when Arroyo got hired, now he's in charge. Maybe he wants to go in a different direction. I definitely think bowl eligibility would be a huge step towards Arroyo certainly keeping his job. I don't see there's any way. I think 6 wins guarantees him at least another year. It will be interesting to see down the stretch. Again, health-wise, going to San Jose State, 6 wins looked super achievable. Now there's lots of questions. So
yeah,
I definitely think it's something to keep an eye on. And yeah, if they don't reach that 6-win mark, I think there will definitely be questions.
Well, and you alluded to it, losing by a combined 82-14 to San Jose State and Air Force the last couple of weeks after they had won 3 of their first 4 games, and the only loss was to the other Power 5 team that you talked about, Cal. So how did things really just unravel so quickly over these last couple of weeks?
Yeah, well, first off, I think it's, to be fair to UNLV, this is the toughest part of their schedule. San Jose State and Air Force, while they're not the powerhouse teams that Notre Dame fans might think of, have been 2 of the best teams in the Mountain West for the past several seasons.
Sure.
I think there was a lot of confidence in UNLV after they beat Utah State, who are the reigning Mountain West champions, in the first game of the Mountain West season. And then they come back. They go down 17-0 against New Mexico and come back. And it was like, oh, well, they can win in different ways. They beat the reigning champions, but New Mexico and Utah State haven't had good seasons since then. So these teams have definitely been the most difficult. And then it's come in the midst of just a huge rash of injuries for UNLV. They're missing 2 starting receivers. They're missing some D-line depth. They're missing, obviously, Doug Brumfeld at quarterback. So this Notre Dame game, maybe 2 weeks ago, people were saying, maybe there's a non-zero chance UNLV can do something at Notre Dame, but it's just coming at a terrible time, both in terms of the difficulty, of their schedule and in terms of where they are health-wise as a team. So it'll be tough for them.
Well, and it looks like the biggest question they've got from the health standpoint is with the quarterback, Doug Brumfield, concussion protocol last week. Any status, that you've got on him right now and his availability potentially for Saturday?
He's still day-to-day. That's what they told us Monday at the post-game press conference. It'll be I don't personally see any reason to want to rush him back besides the obvious safety concerns with concussions and how that has to be handled. UNLV again needs to scrape 2 wins across their final five games, I believe. And I don't see a point personally in rushing him back for this Notre Dame game when you're going to need him against rivals like Hawaii and Nevada, and you've got San Diego State coming up. So I haven't heard anything different. He's still considered day-to-day, but they definitely are missing him. Neither of the quarterbacks who've filled in for him have had the same control over the offense that he did, had the same kind of chemistry. Friel is actually the reigning Mountain West Freshman of the Year because he got forced into action last year due to injuries, but he was injured through fall camp and hasn't had the reps because he hasn't been the starter. So they're definitely in a tough spot there. They would love to have Brumfield back. They could definitely use him, but yeah, I think his status is definitely still questionable.
Well, if he doesn't go, then do you think they use 2 quarterbacks, or do you think it's all Friel? What do you think is potentially the plan?
I still think it's Friel. He wasn't great in their last game against Air Force, but part of that was also just Air Force runs the option. They ran 79 plays and UNLV only ran 35. Friel completed 8 of his 10 passes, but the biggest problem he had was he had a fumbling problem. 2 fumbles and he threw an interception. Those turnovers pretty much backed up in his own end zone too, created a lot of scoring opportunities for Air Force's option play, and UNLV couldn't stop the dive. So I think Brad Roberts, the fullback, had 144 yards, 4 touchdowns, and on 29 carries. So you're not going to win with any of that happening.
Yeah.
And Arroyo was pretty clear that both he and Friel understand that. But that being said, I think there's a reason that Friel has gotten pretty much all the snaps since Brumfield was injured. I don't think they're ready to give Bailey the ball and really spin it like that yet. He's also he's a pocket quarterback, and in the past, UNLV has almost always operated with a dual threat quarterback. So I don't know if they feel maybe limited with that, but I don't see it changing if Brumfield doesn't play. I think Friel is still their guy. They just need him to take care of the ball better.
By the way, speaking of Air Force, we were just talking the other day on our show about the whole situation with the band and the referee going into the stands at the game. Were you aware of that going on when it happened, or did you know the referee was going into the stands when it happened?
I didn't actually. I couldn't really see it from where we were in the press box. I was like, why are we stopping? And then I saw it on Twitter, and I was like, oh, okay, well, why not? Sure, okay,
yeah,
I guess
might as well.
Yeah, college football, awesome.
That's right. Their defense. I mean, the thing that stands out about their defense is the 11 interceptions. How would you just describe the play on that side of the ball?
I think it's a very bend don't break approach. I think Keith Hayward, who Arroyo brought in, they coached together at Oregon. He was coaching, I believe, linebackers at Cal last year, has done a really good job just in terms of making it so that Arroyo doesn't have to think about that side of the ball. Again, he's already head coach and calling plays on offense. And in the past, it kind of seems like he had to worry about the defense a little bit too. And I think Hayward has done a good job of just taking that off his hands. It's someone he really trusts. I think it was a vote of confidence in Arroyo that they went out and got him from a Power 5 school and brought him out to UNLV. I think, again, their approach has been very bend, don't break. Take the secondary will gamble, and the linebackers will also, go for picks and coverage. But what was really helping them early in the season was they were getting a lot of pressure. But they lost their starting nose tackle in the first game of the year, and then one of their best edge rusher, Adam Plant, didn't play against Air Force. And Air Force doesn't throw the ball, so it didn't matter as much. But against San Jose State, for example, I mean, Chevin Cordero was a monster, had like 230 passing yards and over 100 rushing yards, and they couldn't contain him. The D-line couldn't contain him and keep him in the pocket. So that'll be something to watch. They've had trouble with mobile quarterbacks kind of all season, but I think, if they can get Plant back, and he was supposed to return to practice on Tuesday, and then they're going to evaluate him from there. They haven't specified what his injury is, but if they can get him back, that will help their defense massively, just because he brings, and then to see if he can get pressure against an O-line as good as Notre Dame's. This will be the most athletic team that they've played all season, just almost across the board in every position, and it'll definitely be interesting. Their O-line is held up pretty well against every team except San Jose State, but how will that fare against a Notre Dame pass rush? This is something very different from them on pretty much every level. So, that'll be something to watch for sure.
So what do you see maybe as the biggest question for them coming into this matchup?
Oh, the biggest question is definitely Brumfield's health.
Okay.
But if you want to go a little broader than that,
I'd say maybe beyond that then.
Yeah. I'd say it's more of just can they show just anything that gives you hope that they can get this thing back on track? Just can you avoid another blowout? 3 blowouts in a row would be, I think, just morally kind of heartbreaking for them after having such a good start and believing that maybe they could do something this year. I think Arroyo said in the past, you want to make sure that one loss doesn't hurt you multiple weeks, that it doesn't cause you to lose another game. And, now they've had 2 brutal losses in a row. I think you don't want to go 3 games giving up 40 points and scoring 1 touchdown. I think that should be kind of the goal for them, is really just can you keep it close? Can your offense find some kind of rhythm? Can your defense get a couple good stops? I think against San Jose State, the punter had 7 punts. Can you maybe punt the ball 3 or 4 times instead of 7? I think that's kind of, to me, what I'm looking for. I'm sure they're obviously going in trying to win the game, but to me, I'm really looking at is there any sign that this team can put it back together and scrap 2 more wins in those last couple games?
Yeah, if it's any solace, Notre Dame has been a double-digit favorite 3 other times, and those games have not fared well for them. So, they've lost 2 of those 3, and the other one they squeaked one out against Cal. So, I don't know. We'll see how this shakes out. I think we're, sitting on this side, there are just as many questions. It's one thing to say UNLV is a 24-point or 25, whatever it is now, point underdog. But, like I said, Notre Dame's got some questions of their own and things they're trying to figure out. So I don't know what to make of this matchup from this end right now.
It'll be really interesting because I think after the Cal game, which UNLV certainly felt like they had a chance to win that game, the offense stalled out I think they didn't score the last 5 possessions, but one of those possessions, they recovered an onside kick. And then the other one, I think they got down to Cal's 10 before turning it over on downs. So they definitely felt like they could have won that game. And I know, again, I'm from the Bay Area. I know Cal fans definitely felt like they should have won that game.
Sure.
So, or against Notre Dame. So there's definitely, I think around that time was the highest optimism of maybe UNLV can do something against the Irish. It's, maybe it's a non-zero chance that something crazy will happen. And these last couple of weeks have been a little bit of a reality check, but you never know what could happen. Maybe there's some inspiration being in Notre Dame and they pull something off, but we'll see. It'll be a fun day, even if maybe the score doesn't reflect that.
Maybe there's some symmetry and, like you're talking about, Cal felt like they should have won. There was obviously a lot of, the phantom offsides call and some other calls in that game. And then, of course, the Stanford game. I don't know if you saw it this past weekend, but there were a lot of Notre Dame people who were not happy about some calls coming out of that game either. So, and you get, of course, they're both big Bay Area rivals and all that kind of stuff.
For sure. This is kind of crazy. I haven't told this to any Notre Dame people. I went to high school with Aaron Banks.
Really?
The offensive lineman who's on the Niners now. Yeah, he went to He went to El Cerrito High School, which is where I went. He was in my class. Great guy.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very good. All right. Andy Yamashita from the Las Vegas Review Journal. Have a safe trip in, and we'll have to look you up in the press box definitely this weekend.
For sure. Thanks for having me. It's been great to talk.
Absolutely. Thanks for doing this.
All right.